Is the phrase, very delighted, ever wrong? I was just browsing the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English and stumbled on this peculiar note under the entry for delighted. Delighted is not used with very. You say, I'm absolutely delighted. Don't say, I'm very delighted. This note is rather non-committal. An earlier edition flat out says this. Do not say very delighted. Say absolutely delighted. The definition of delighted is very pleased and happy. Perhaps very is already implied, so another intensifying very would be redundant. But then why does absolutely work? This Merriam-Webster blog post suggests that it seems somewhat arbitrary that grammarians decided that certain past participle-based adjectives can't seem to mix well with very, suggesting that another possible reason for this is that delighted is not 100% a full-fledged adjective, but rather, it's still somewhat of a past participle and is thus resistant to very. Randolph Quirk's A Comprehensive Grammar of the English Language gives 4 criteria that must be met before a participle graduates from verbhood and is given adjectival status. It can be used attributively, you have your annoyed face on. In predicative use with seem, you seem rather annoyed with me. It can be pre-modified by very, yes, I am very annoyed. It can be used in comparison, I would say I am more annoyed than when you dropped my goldfish. And then there's this self-identified American speaker, who gave the highest voted answer, who claims they expect to hear very delighted, still. So is very delighted right, or wrong? Is there some inherent quasi-grammatical limitation to delighted as a past participle-based adjective? Or is it just a matter of collocation, some nebulous notion that makes very delighted sound awkward?
The grammarians that you quote are on weak ground. There are other words that contain the notion of intensification. To give 2 examples, there are Cambridgington seen and forceful, or of a feeling, very strong. Macmillan brilliant, very intelligent, very skillful, impressive, or successful. Both these words, and others, are often intensified by very. The grammarian argument seems to be that a word deriving from intensification, very, extremely, gravely, even absolutely, of another word must not itself be intensified. This restricts the scale of intensification arbitrarily. It also expects users of a word to consider its antecedents, meaning, and etymology before intensifying it. Degrees of intensification are acceptable. It is appalling equals very bad that grammarians should adopt such an attitude, and, furthermore, it is very appalling that they presume to prescribe our usage. As a matter of usage rather than semantics, they are clearly wrong, very wrong, extremely wrong, and absolutely wrong.
Adjectives like amazing, awful, and boiling are also non-gradable. They already contain the idea of very in their definitions. If we want to make extreme adjectives stronger, we have to use absolutely or really. The argument that delighted doesn't take very is based on delighted being an ungradable rather than a gradable adjective. It carries implications that are closer to words like dead and pregnant. People can't be a little bit dead, they either are or they're not. As such, the intensifier would be a pure intensifier and not a qualifier or quantifier. Definitions seem to be looser in current use. It wouldn't sound particularly strange to ask how delighted are you, in which case very delighted would be fine and it might be considered pedantic to take issue with it.
You can certainly come up with theoretical arguments against it, but very delighted is delightfully common. Ngram Viewer says it's more common than very much delighted and about half as common as absolutely delighted. More importantly, it's quite frequently used by native speakers. Some examples: the late Queen Elizabeth, Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, Justin Trudeau, Martin Luther King. Edit. According to Ngram Viewer, absolutely delighted is far more common than very delighted in British English, so its acceptability may vary between dialects. That said, Queen Elizabeth used very delighted at least once, see above, as has Prince William. For those calling it a poor stylistic choice, the MLK example above is from the opening of Beyond Vietnam, a masterpiece of oratory and one of his greatest speeches.
According to Wikipedia, the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English, IDOS, first published by Longman in 1978, is an advanced learner's dictionary, providing definitions using a restricted vocabulary, helping non-native English speakers understand meanings easily. It is available in 4 configurations. As is the case with learners' dictionaries in general, IDOS has usage guidelines that have to be prescriptive. So what they mean by "don't say" is not always that the construction is not grammatical per se, but sometimes that it's not idiomatic or natural among native speakers. This gram shows that very delighted is the least productive among adverb plus delighted. Although it is shown above not delighted, very delighted is actually less productive than even not delighted. Just because famous people have uttered this expression doesn't mean it's necessarily idiomatic or natural. Native speakers, famous or not, do utter unidiomatic or unnatural things from time to time. What's clear is that the expression will never make it to the article of the New York Times or some such, unless in a quote. I don't agree with the Merriam-Webster blog post you've cited, and it is not even relevant here, because very pleased, unlike very delighted, is the most productive of all, adverb, plus pleased, according to this gram. Note also that much ecstatic is even less productive than very ecstatic, according to this gram, which perhaps tells us that adjectives converted from past participles are more likely to be collocated with much. I think you may have guessed it right when you said the definition of delighted is very pleased and happy. Perhaps very is already implied, so another intensifying very would be redundant? Note very ecstatic is similarly unproductive, according to this gram. Finally. But then why does absolutely work? I guess absolutely, as well as other emphasizing adverbs such as so and quite, emphasizes the following adjective in a different way than does very.
Please control